Get this woman out of here before she embarrasses everyone." The voice came from somewhere behind Maya, sharp enough to cut through the music. The young black woman froze, her simple black dress brushing against a silver table as she stumbled backward. A glass tipped over and crashed onto the marble floor. The laughter came next, soft at first, then louder. Phones lifted, screens glowed. Someone whispered, "Oh, she really thought she belonged here." A hand snatched the gold-edged invitation from Maya's grasp and waved it high, like a trophy. "Look, every one fake ticket." She printed this herself. The paper tore in two. The sound echoed across the hall of the Los Angeles Art Museum, where hundreds of wealthy guests turned to watch the scene unfold. Security stepped closer, unsure whether to intervene. The crowd began filming, forming a perfect circle around Maya, as if humiliation was part of the evening show. She bent down slowly, picking up the torn pieces with trembling fingers. Every flash of a camera felt like a slap. Whispers and laughter rippled through the air like poison. Maya's voice didn't rise, her face didn't change, but her silence said everything. Have you ever been destroyed in public by people who had no idea they were writing their own downfall? Before we proceed, like this video, subscribe and comment where you are watching from. Now, let's begin. The torn paper lay scattered at Maya's feet. She stared at it for a moment before kneeling to pick up each piece, one after another. Her hands shook, but her face stayed calm. Around her, laughter grew louder. It felt like the sound of rain hitting a metal roof cold, endless and painful. Phones hovered above her like streetlights. Dozens of screens were recording, capturing her every small movement. Someone whispered, she should know her place. Another voice answered, "This is so embarrassing." The words floated around her like smoke. A guard in a dark suit took one hesitant step forward, then stopped when a woman in a sparkling gown lifted her hand. The guard lowered his eyes and stepped back. Maya understood. Money had spoken. Power had decided that her pain was entertainment. She stood slowly, the torn invitation still in her hand. The soft music that had once filled the hall had stopped. The air smelled of perfume, champagne, and cruelty. No one helped her. No one said a word. She pressed the pieces of paper together, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her dress, plain but clean suddenly, felt like a crime. She could feel the weight of their eyes, judging every thread. A voice near the front laughed again. "Can someone tell her this is a private event?" Another person added, "She probably walked in from the street." The crowd chuckled. Some pretended to be shocked. Others whispered behind their glasses of wine. Maya's throat felt dry, but she said nothing. Her silence seemed to make them angrier. The same woman who had started it all stepped closer, her perfume strong and sharp. "You people always find your way into places you don't belong," she said, her voice low but loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's getting ridiculous." The crowd nodded, murmuring in agreement. Maya looked up at her. For a second, their eyes met. There was no hate in Maya's gaze-only quiet strength. That look made the woman pause, then scoff, breaking eye contact. Behind Maya, the museum's tall glass doors reflected everything: the chandeliers, the guests, the cruelty. If she turned around, she would see herself surrounded, a single person against a sea of judgment. She didn't turn. She refused to give them the image they wanted. One man in the back whispered, "This will go viral." Another laughed. "Good. Maybe she'll think twice next time." The words stung, but Maya's calm expression never changed. She took a deep breath and stood a little straighter. Inside, her heart ached, but something stronger than pain began to rise, a quiet promise to herself that this moment would not define her. The guard returned, his voice soft. "Ma'am, maybe we should step outside, just to sort things out." His eyes showed pity, but also fear. He wasn't protecting her, he was protecting his job. Maya nodded. "Of course," she said gently. "But first, may I collect my things?" Her tone was polite, controlled, almost unsettling. A few guests exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected her to beg, to cry, to shout. Instead, she stood there with a grace that didn't match their cruelty. The woman in the gown frowned. "Just get her out," she ordered. "This is uncomfortable for everyone." Uncomfortable. The word echoed in Maya's mind. It wasn't her presence that made them uneasy, it was their reflection in her calmness. Her silence was a mirror, showing them what they had become. As she bent to pick up her small black clutch, someone's camera flash went off. The white light filled her vision for a moment. She blinked and straightened, still holding the torn pieces of paper. They looked fragile, but in her hands they became something else, a record of what they had done. The guard motioned toward the exit again. "Please, ma'am." She nodded once more and began walking slowly through the crowd. Every step sounded too loud against the marble floor. The guests parted slightly, forming a narrow path. Phones kept recording. She heard whispers following her like shadows. Who invited her? She's brave to even show her face. Someone post this. Halfway to the doors, Maya stopped. She turned, her eyes sweeping over the glittering crowd. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Even the music had not resumed. "I'm sorry if my presence offends anyone," she said quietly. "That was never my intention." Her voice was calm but clear. Every word carried through the hall. The guests froze. The guard looked away. The woman in the gown shifted uncomfortably. Maya continued, "I came here because I was invited, because I believed this place stood for something more than wealth and titles." She paused, "But maybe I was wrong." Someone near the back whispered, "She's lying." Another said, "Just let her go." Maya took a slow breath. "It's fine," she said softly. "I'll leave." She turned again toward the door, and for a brief moment, the hall was silent except for the faint hum of air conditioning. The guard opened the glass doors for her. Cool night air rushed in, brushing against her skin like comfort after fire. Outside, the city lights of Los Angeles glittered against the dark sky. She could still hear laughter inside, muffled now by the glass. She looked down at the torn invitation one last time, pressing the pieces together carefully. Her fingers traced the gold printer family name half visible beneath the tear. Maya whispered to herself, "They don't know who I am." It wasn't pride. It was disbelief mixed with sorrow. She closed her hand around the paper and exhaled slowly. Inside, the laughter grew again, covering the shame that none of them wanted to face. But somewhere deep inside Maya, a quiet strength began to form, a seed planted in humiliation, waiting for its time to grow. The night air outside the Los Angeles Art Museum felt colder than it should. Maya stood on the museum steps, clutching the torn invitation in her hand. Cars passed along the quiet boulevard, their lights reflecting on the glass walls behind her. Inside, the laughter had started again, louder this time, desperate to fill the guilt that had begun to creep through the crowd. She could still hear faint music leaking from the hall. Every note reminded her of what had just happened. A few guests had stepped outside for fresh air, whispering to each other as they passed her. None of them looked her in the eyes. They hurried away, pretending she didn't exist. For a moment, Maya thought about leaving. She could have walked away, out and in her car, and disappeared. But something stopped her. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was pain. Maybe it was the quiet voice inside her that said, "Don't run. Not tonight." She sat on the edge of the steps, breathing slowly. The torn paper in her hand fluttered in the wind. Her phone buzzed inside her clutch 3 missed calls. She didn't look at the screen. She already knew who it was. Behind the glass doors, she could see the guests moving around again. They were pretending everything was fine. Waiters poured wine. Cameras flashed. But now, the mood had changed. A few people were arguing softly near the table where her invitation had been torn. Security guards whispered to each other, unsure of what to do. Inside, one of the waiters approached the woman in the sparkling gown. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "the director would like to speak with you." The woman frowned. "About what?" the guest at the door, he replied. "There seems to be confusion about her name." The woman waved him off. "There's no confusion. She crashed the event." But her voice trembled slightly. For the first time that evening, she wasn't fully sure. Back outside, Maya's phone buzzed again. She sighed and finally answered. "Dad?" she said softly. "Maya," her father's voice came through. "Calm but firm. You sound shaken." "Where are you?" "At the museum," she whispered. There was an issue with the invitation. There was silence on the other end. Then his voice turned sharper. "What kind of issue?" "They thought it was fake," Maya said quietly. "They tore it up, in front of everyone." The line went quiet again. She could almost hear her father's breathing. "Stay where you are," he said finally. "Don't go anywhere. I'm on my way." "Dad," but the call had already ended. Maya stared at the phone in her hand, unsure of what to feel. She didn't want him to come. She didn't want this to become bigger than it already was. But deep down, she knew it already was. Inside the hall, the museum director, Dr. Helen Carter, was standing near a table filled with guest lists and donation files. Her assistant held up a tablet. "Dr. Carter, the Johnson Foundation is one of tonight's top sponsors. Their contribution won $100,000. Dr. Carter frowned. Then why was their guest treated like a stranger? Her assistant hesitated. Because no one checked the full list. People assumed. That word sat heavy in the air. Dr. Carter straightened her jacket and looked toward the crowd. "Where's the woman now?" "Outside," the assistant said. "I want her brought back in," Dr. Carter said firmly. Meanwhile, Maya remained seated on the steps, trying to calm her breathing. Her chest ached. Her hands were cold. She could still feel the sting of the woman's grip on her arm, the sound of the crowd laughing. Every second replayed in her mind like a cruel movie she couldn't turn off. Then she noticed something strange. Through the glass, a few people had stopped laughing. They were no longer filming. Some were talking quietly to each other. A man in a dark suit, older and distinguished, was standing near the entrance, holding his phone low, recording discreetly. His face looked serious, almost disappointed. Maya didn't know it, but his name was Robert King, a retired judge and one of the museum's biggest donors. He had seen everything, and he didn't like what he saw. Inside, a heated conversation began. Some guests insisted the incident be handled privately. Others argued it was too late. Videos were already spreading online. Short clips had been uploaded to social media within minutes. Comments were flooding in, and "GT, this looks bad. They're bullying that woman. Who even checks if an invite is real in public?" Phones around the room started buzzing. People were realizing this wasn't just a scene, it was a scandal forming live. Outside, Maya's phone vibrated again. This time, a message popped up. Dad, 5 minutes away. Her stomach turned. She didn't want him to see her like this. She wanted to appear strong, calm, unbroken. But her throat tightened when she imagined the look on his face. The museum doors opened. Dr. Carter stepped out, her heels clicking on the stone steps. She looked at Maya, her professional smile tight with concern. "Miss Johnson, is it?" Maya nodded slowly. "I owe you an apology," Dr. Carter said. "There's been a serious mistake." Maya didn't answer. She just held up the torn invitation. "This was supposed to be my seat." Dr. Carter's eyes softened. "I know," she said quietly. "And we'll fix this. Please, come inside. It's best we handle this calmly." Maya hesitated, glancing through the glass doors. The same people who laughed at her were still inside. Some were watching. Some looked away, pretending to care about their champagne. She took a slow breath and stood up. "All right," she said finally. "Let's go." As they walked back toward the entrance, Maya could feel the eyes returning to her. The crowd's whispers started again, but now the tone had changed. Some voices were uncertain, others defensive. The laughter was gone. In its place was the uneasy hum of people realizing they might have gone too far. A single word started to spread through the crowd. "Johnson." One man whispered, "Wait, Johnson Foundation." Another answered, "Her father's name is on the sponsor list." Someone else muttered, "Oh no." The mood shifted like a sudden wind. Faces that once smiled now tightened with fear. Maya stepped back into the hall with Dr. Carter beside her. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any voice in the room. At that moment, one thing became clear. The same people who had laughed minutes ago were now the ones holding their breath. And outside, a black car was already pulling up to the museum entrance. Maya's father had arrived. The glass doors of the Los Angeles Art Museum swung open again. The sound alone silenced the entire room. Every guest turned. A tall man in a dark gray suit stepped inside, his presence commanding without a word. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of authority and quiet power. David Johnson didn't look around to admire the art or the chandeliers. His gaze moved straight to Maya. She stood near the entrance, her torn invitation still in hand. Their eyes met for a brief second. He didn't ask what happened. He could already see it written in the tension hanging over the crowd. Dr. Helen Carter hurried to him, her professional confidence now replaced with unease. "Mr. Johnson, please, let me explain." He raised a hand gently. "Not now," he said. His voice was low but firm, the kind of voice that made people stop talking even when he whispered. He turned toward his daughter. "Are you all right?" Maya nodded slowly. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice shook just slightly. David's jaw tightened. He looked down at the torn invitation in her hand, then back at the crowd. "Woe Torah this?" No one answered. The silence in the hall was heavy enough to hear the soft hum of the lights above. The same people who had been laughing minutes ago were now frozen in place, eyes darting between one another. David looked around the room. "It's a simple question," he said quietly. "Who tore my daughter's invitation?" Dr. Carter took a step forward. "Mr. Johnson, I assure you, this is not a reflection of the museum's values. We deeply regret—" He cut her off again. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for the truth." From somewhere near the center of the crowd, a woman in a sparkling silver gown finally stepped forward. Her face looked pale under the lights. I was only trying to maintain order," she said nervously. "We thought she didn't belong here." David studied her in silence. The woman shifted uneasily, glancing at the phones that were still filming. Her perfect posture began to crumble under his gaze. "So you assumed," he said quietly. She nodded. "It was a misunderstanding." David tilted his head slightly. A misunderstanding that was recorded by over 200 people. Her throat tightened. Around her, a few guests lowered their phones, realizing the danger in continuing to film. Dr. Carter spoke again, her voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Johnson, I've reviewed the donor list. The Johnson Foundation is our platinum sponsor for tonight's event. This should never have happened." David's eyes softened slightly as he turned to her. "I appreciate your honesty," he said calmly. Then his tone sharpened again. "But I want everyone in this room to understand something. My daughter doesn't carry my name to prove her worth. She carries her own." Maya stood quietly beside him, eyes on the floor. The woman in the gown whispered, "We didn't know." David looked at her. "That's exactly the problem." He turned slowly, addressing the crowd. "You didn't know who she was, so you decided she didn't matter. You saw a young black woman in a simple dress and assumed she couldn't possibly belong here. And you called that standards." No one spoke. The weight of his words pressed down like a storm. Even the cameras had stopped recording, some from guilt, others from fear of what they had captured. Then, from the corner of the room, a soft voice broke the silence. "He's right." All heads turned. It was an older man in a dark suit, holding a phone in his hand. His name was Robert King, a respected businessman and longtime donor. "I saw everything," he said quietly. "And I recorded it. What happened here was wrong." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. The woman in the gown's face drained of color. Robert continued, "She never raised her voice. She never disrespected anyone, yet she was treated like an intruder because of how she looked. That's not order, that's prejudice." Dr. Carter placed a hand over her mouth, realizing how deep the damage had gone. David nodded to Robert. "Thank you for your honesty." He turned back to the crowd. Tonight was supposed to be a night for charity, a night to celebrate generosity and compassion. Instead, it became a mirror showing who we really are when we think no one important is watching. Several guests looked away, unable to meet his gaze. Some lowered their glasses, suddenly ashamed of what they'd laughed at. Then David took out his phone and made a call. The room went completely still. "Mark," he said into the phone, his voice calm, "cancel tomorrow's signing with Grant Enterprises. Yes, the $750 million partnership. I'll explain soon." The crowd gasped quietly. Whispers spread instantly. "Grant Enterprises? That's Edward Grant's company. That deal was supposed to save them? Did he just cancel it?" David ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. The woman in the gown's husband, Edward Grant, stepped forward, his face pale. "David, please," he stammered. "This was all a misunderstanding. My wife didn't mean—" David raised a hand. "I don't do business with people who see humiliation as entertainment." Edward swallowed hard. "You'll destroy hundreds of jobs." David looked straight at him. "No, Edward. You destroyed them the moment your family tore up that invitation." Maya's heart clenched hearing those words. She didn't want it to end like this. Her father was right, but she also knew destruction wouldn't heal anything. She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Dad!" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Let them explain." He looked at her, surprised. Her eyes were steady, calm, full of quiet strength, the same look her mother used to have. For a moment, the entire room waited for his response. David took a slow breath. "Explain?" he asked softly. "Then I'll listen. But this explanation won't be spoken to me. It will be spoken to her." He stepped aside, leaving Maya standing in front of the crowd that had humiliated her. The same people who had laughed now stared at her, unsure what to say. The woman in the silver gown stepped forward again, tears welling up. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I judged you. I thought I was protecting something important, but all I protected was my own pride." Maya said nothing. Her silence carried more power than any speech could. David placed a hand gently on his daughter's shoulder. "Sometimes silence teaches better than anger," he said softly. The woman looked down. The torn invitation still in Maya's hand trembled slightly in the light. The damage was already done, but the lesson had only begun. And as the guests stood frozen in the glow of their own shame, none of them realized that the videos of that night were already spreading across the internet. By morning, the world would know what they had done. By morning, the entire city was talking about it. Clips from the Los Angeles Art Museum flooded every social platform. The short video of Maya standing still while a crowd laughed at her had already passed 2 million views overnight. The internet had turned the night's cruelty into a mirror for the whole world. News headlines appeared one after another. "Billionaire's daughter humiliated at charity gala." "Socialites mock black guest. Discover her father owns the event." The $750 million deal that collapsed in one night. Every phone in the Grant Mansion buzzed relentlessly. Calls from reporters, angry shareholders, and board members who couldn't believe what they had seen. Evelyn Grant, the woman in the silver gown, sat at her dining table with trembling hands. Her perfect world had cracked open. The same people who praised her yesterday were now demanding answers. Her husband, Edward Grant, paced the floor. "It's everywhere," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "We can't stop it now." Their son Ryan sat silently, staring at his phone. "Dad," he said in a low voice, "it's worse than you think. People are tagging our company in every post. There are calls to boycott. Our stock's already dropping." Evelyn buried her face in her palms. "What have we done?" she whispered. Across the city, Maya sat quietly by the window of her father's home, watching the morning light spill through the curtains. She hadn't slept. The images of the previous night kept replaying in her mind: the laughter, the phones, the way no one stepped in to help. David Johnson walked into the room, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You've been up all night," he said softly. "I couldn't sleep," Maya admitted. "It's everywhere, Dad." He nodded, setting a cup beside her. "I know." Maya turned to face him. "What happens now?" David looked out the window, his tone calm but heavy. "Now the truth does its work. At noon, news vans lined the street outside the Grant residence. Cameras flashed as the family stepped outside for a brief statement. Evelyn's voice shook as she spoke. "We are deeply sorry for our actions at last night's charity gala. It was never our intention to harm anyone. We let our pride and prejudice cloud our judgment." The reporters shouted questions, but Edward quickly guided her back inside. It was too late. The apology already sounded like damage control, not remorse. Inside Johnson Technologies headquarters, David's board members watched the same footage. One of them turned to him. "David, the world's watching how you handle this. You could end their company right now if you wanted." David didn't answer immediately. He leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "I could," he said slowly. "But what would that change?" His assistant looked confused. "You mean, forgive them?" David shook his head. "No. Forgiveness without responsibility isn't change. But destruction helps no one either. We hold them accountable the right way." He sent a short message from his phone. Meeting. 4 p.m. Los Angeles Art Museum. All involved parties required. By late afternoon, the same marble hall where Maya was humiliated was filled again. But this time, the energy was different. Reporters waited quietly. Board members from both companies stood in small groups. The tension was thick. When David and Maya entered, the whispers stopped. Evelyn, Edward, and their children stood together at the center of the hall. Their faces looked nothing like they had the night before. Gone were the proud smiles, confident postures. All that was left was shame. David faced them calmly. "You know why we're here," he said. "Your company's survival depends not on a deal, but on your willingness to change." Edward nodded, his voice low. "We'll do whatever it takes. We know we've done terrible harm." Maya looked at him quietly. "Do you?" she asked. "Because last night wasn't just an accident. It was how you've treated people for years, and no one called you out until now." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "You're right," she said softly. "We built our world on walls that kept people like you out. Last night, those walls finally broke. We saw ourselves for who we truly were." David stepped forward. "Then here's what happens next." He outlined a plan with slow, deliberate words. "Public apology not for show, but for truth. Every member of your leadership will undergo training to understand the biases that caused this. A new Fund $10 million will be created to support underprivileged students in Los Angeles. And from now on, your company will open its doors to diversity, not just as a headline, but as policy." Evelyn nodded through tears. "We accept everything," she said. Every word. Maya looked at her father. "And if they fail?" David's gaze hardened. Then the partnership dies, and they face the full weight of the market. The cameras clicked. The world was listening. 6 months later, the same museum glittered with light again, but this time the air felt different. The banners read, "The Johnson Grant Responsibility Summit." The event brought together business leaders, students, and activists. Maya stood at the podium, her voice steady, her presence calm. 6 months ago, this hall witnessed something painful. It showed how easy it is for prejudice to hide behind wealth and titles. But it also showed what's possible when people choose growth instead of pride. She looked toward the Grant family, sitting in the front row. Evelyn gave a small nod, tears in her eyes. "Change doesn't erase the past," Maya continued, "but it can build a better future. The question isn't whether we make mistakes, it's what we do after we see them." The audience rose in applause. Cameras flashed, but this time the light wasn't harsh. It was warm. When the event ended, Evelyn approached Maya quietly. "Thank you," she said softly. "You could have destroyed us. Instead, you gave us a second chance." Maya smiled gently. "My father taught me that power means nothing if it can't lift others." Outside, the sunset painted Los Angeles in gold. Reporters called it the Night of Change. 2 years later, Maya stood at the podium of the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva. Her voice carried across the hall. 2 years ago, I was humiliated in a room full of people who thought they were better than me. Today, that moment has become a lesson for the world. True power isn't about money or fame, it's about using what you have to make things right. Her speech ended with silence, then thunderous applause. Somewhere back in Los Angeles, Evelyn Grant watched from her office, tears running down her face. On her desk sat a framed copy of the torn invitation, now pieced together, preserved as a reminder. She whispered to herself, "Never again." And for once, she meant it. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that respect costs nothing, but losing it can cost everything. Maya walked in with grace. They mocked her and learned the hard way that dignity is more powerful than wealth. Never let anyone decide your worth by how you look or where you come from. True power isn't money. It's character. Before you go, like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. And remember, silence can speak louder than revenge.